Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the WFA and AdFin webinar on programmatic media, seeing through the financial fog. Now, this session should last for around about 60 minutes, and to preempt the question, the slides will be available afterwards, I think. That's dependent on Andrew, I'm sure they will be. Now, just clicking through to the next slide, I've seen Andrew present before, and I think you'll find this to be a very interesting proposition indeed. But before we dive into Andrew's slides, some very quick introductions. First of all, there's me on the left. I'm Matt. I lead the Media Forum and the Digital Forum at the WFA. On the right, the star of the show, some may say, is Andrew Alterson, the CEO of AdFin. And Andrew, I'm sure, will tell you a little bit more about his company soon. Now, the next slide, for those of you who are not aware, shows the two different types of member within the WFA. Now, there are actually 55 national advertiser associations, and including the world's largest ad markets, some of which are joining this webinar today. And on the next slide, we're showing the second type of member, the 75 corporates that we work for, covering most sectors. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have separate forums or work streams, and the Media Forum and the Digital Forum are two examples of these. These are designed to accommodate the many different marketing disciplines which are in operation across the different companies that we work for. Now, the Media Forum focuses exclusively on paid media topics, and the Digital Forum looks at paid, owned, and earned exclusively within the digital space, obviously. Now, the next slide, what we're looking at here is the top priorities for the Media Forum, because although this topic sits between the two groups, media and digital, it does seem to be a core priority for the Media Forum. Think to the fact that this is about paid media, programmatic in essence. So what we're looking at here is the core priorities of the Media Forum. We ask you guys, we ask the network at the beginning of the year what you're focused on this year to enable us to tailor our services to you. And what we can see is that digital media comes out on top, ranked out of 7. We've got transparency, number 2. We've got return on investment, and then we've got trading desks and DSPs. So all of these, in some way or another, refer back to programmatic. I mean, trading desks and DSPs refer clearly to that space, but digital media naturally does as well, and transparency is a very big component of the programmatic piece. Now, what we're looking at in the next slide is some research that we've conducted, because at WFA we've done a bit of work into this space. We've done a couple of different research pieces, and we've also produced a guide. And we asked, not long ago, do you feel that trading desks are more or less transparent than the traditional methods of trading? And almost 8/10 of our respondents said, actually, we think it's less transparent than the traditional methods. So transparency is a really big issue out there. And on our next slide, what we're looking at here is a quick snapshot from what we call the money flow. And this is where many of the transparency issues are focused, I think. Now, what we're looking at here is the way that the money is split up between the many intermediaries in the programmatic space. So if the client spends 100, how much of that actually ends up as so-called working media with the publisher? Well, according to these industry estimates, it's around about 40%. So you've got 60% going elsewhere. Now, it's not to say that these guys don't need to be paid, right? Because the exchange, the DSP, all of these protagonists do need to be paid, and if they weren't, it wouldn't really be programmatic anymore. You can't take all these pieces out and expect it to work in the same way. So they need to be paid, but the question is how much, okay? So on the next slide, the next piece that we talk about quite a bit within programmatic is so-called arbitrage. And this is the practice where trading desks may buy inventory at wholesale prices and then sell on to clients at retail prices. And reasonably enough, clients have been fairly sort of negative towards this. They've had concerns around this, but it does appear to be fairly widespread. In fact, we asked whether your trading desk is engaged with this practice, whether you know it's engaged. And a little over half, 54%, said, yes, we are aware it's going on, and I know that privately many clients are really concerned about this, because they would rather not be paying retail prices. They'd rather be paying the wholesale prices that those agencies have access. So that's a big issue as well. But how is this dealt with? Well, the next slide just looks at the ways that clients are engaging vendors in the programmatic space year on year. So what we can see is that in 2013, most 81% were using agency trading desks. And interestingly, this is declining in favor of going direct with independent trading desks or DSPs. That's clearly on the upswing there. And that makes sense because having direct contractual terms, direct contractual relationships is probably the best way to ensure visibility and control within programmatic. And indeed, within our guide, and by the way, this is available on our website if you haven't already seen it, within our guide, we talk about the different models that you can operate within programmatic. And you've got the agency trading desk model, you've got a hybrid model, and then you've got the brand trading desk model, which is really all about having direct contractual relationships with suppliers, which should give you the best level of control. So some clients have done that, but there are still some challenges out there with obtaining visibility. And the next slide just looks at, we asked here, we said, have you found any way to control or manage the lack of transparency with your independent or agency trading desk? And it's good to see that 38% have said, yeah, we have found a way. However, just under half, 48%, are saying, no, we're still in the dark. We still have no way to protect or to ensure transparency with our trading desk. And this continues to be a problem. And that is what today's presentation is all about. Andrew's going to be talking about how you can get more visibility into this space. So in just a second, I'm going to hand over to Andrew. But before I do, this next slide, you'll have seen this already. There's a little Q&A widget on your screen, hopefully on the right-hand side of your screen. You can see a chat window as well. Now, if you do have any questions for Andrew, please do put them in here. And we'll ensure we reserve a few minutes at the end of this session to fire those over to Andrew. So as you go, send them over. I'll collect them and we'll grill Andrew afterwards. So please do that. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Andrew. Andrew, please introduce yourself and kick off. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. First, I assume you can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that was great. Thank you for the setup and the intro. I couldn't ask for better data to be the segue and the intro. I am Andrew Alterson. I'm the CEO of AdFin Solutions. We are a company entirely focused on this area, bringing visibility and intelligence to programmatic. By background, to give you a little bit of perspective on how I see things, prior to this, I've spent 20 plus years in the agency space, having worked at most of the holding companies and most recently running all the digital media operations for Havas in North America. So very familiar with the way media has been bought and sold previous to the trading desk era and the programmatic era, as well as where we are now. I'm a big believer that through intelligence and through visibility, we can make a much stronger marketplace for all of you. So with that, I'm going to jump in and the questions, if you have any as we go along, we will try to hold most of them for the end. But if there's anything you really want to ask, just put it in there, and I'll have Matt interrupt me because I don't see them right now as I'm presenting. So let me just start with setting the stage and how we view the situation. So there is no doubt that programmatic is our new reality. It is big and getting bigger. It's $15 billion in the US, it's $20 billion globally and growing. It is a very powerful set of technologies. It brings great promise to our industry. It has amazing abilities to target, to scale, to create efficiency, to bring you ROI. So the message out of this presentation is not to push for programmatically traded media. But with all that great promise, most of these transactions are virtually blind to you, the buyer, and to your counterparts, the publishers, the sellers. And we say blind, really blind from a price perspective. There are other elements too that are very problematic that we'll talk about, but very much so in terms of that retail wholesale pricing that Matt just talked about. And so this complexity of the ecosystem and really the fog that has been built into the system, and I'm not saying it was purposely built into the system, but it is where we are now, is really costing you, the advertiser, the buyer, plenty of money. And so it's our ambition to really help you guys take greater control. It's your supply chain, it's a complex supply chain, and it needs the advertisers to really start looking at it as a complex supply chain and take control, demand accountability, and demand far more visibility into pricing. And that's where we are today. So, three things we're going to chat about. One is how we view the issue and the big issue here, which is the quote unquote lack of financial transparency and what we mean by that. What we can begin to do about it, which is begin to build a far more robust capability for programmatic intelligence. And then really want to help all of you think a little bit about reframing how you set KPIs in a programmatic world. And we'll wrap up with some what I hope are relatively concrete recommendations on how to help you guys. So let's talk about what the big issue is from our perspective. So these are just three of a few headlines. There's probably one a week, if not more, here in the States, and I'm sure overseas, where, as we say, admitting the problem is the first step to solving it. And whether or not it's the Media Post article at the top that's just saying, look, this programmatic transparency needs to be fixed and fast, or really the bottom one from Ad Age that really is stressing the quote unquote fuzzy pricing. I think it's a very cute way to put the issue. But in a way, that is where we are. There's a real quote unquote black box to how pricing happens and and whether or not you as the advertiser are getting the best price that you can. And so let's just talk a little bit about this. For those, some of you know this very well, some of you may not, how this all works here. But fundamentally, you, the brand, are traditionally contracting with your agency, who's usually part of a holding company, not always. And they're using their trading desk or an independent trading desk, but predominantly more and more it's an in-house trading desk. And that trading desk is leveraging a whole series of DSP technologies, demand side, buy side technologies that connect to the sell side technologies. And the two issues that are very pervasive and being discussed. Well, the first one is all over the news, and that is all the fraud and viewability issues in this space. And this is a major issue. It is at least getting a tremendous amount of attention, and there are a host of companies focused on trying to find technical and procedural ways to solve these. And I think we're making more and more progress on that front. But the other quote unquote elephant in the room is the lack of financial transparency. And as the WFA has done, and we have leveraged a lot of their work, so we appreciate that. Is that, as Matt was saying, only 40 cents of every dollar is basically buying media, and that's, I would say, a highly conservative estimate, and is one that we're really trying to investigate far deeper, and we'll talk about that. But this is the area that needs more attention. The fraud and viewability is getting tremendous amount of attention, and I think that's great. But now we need to raise the awareness and the focus on the financial transparency part of this. So again, leveraging the great work done by the WFA, we use this as a starting point. And as was laid out a minute ago, you've got each of the major constituents and a logical number of what they're most likely charging you. Whether it's your agency at 5% and your desk at 15 and your DSP at 10. And the value adds, those are everything else. Those are the third-party data, the viewability, the fraud, attribution, ad serving. That stuff adds up. Every one of these numbers, I would say, is highly conservative, which means that the 40% number is probably conservative. But what we're saying here is, on average, a dollar is buying 40 cents of media, and as was laid out earlier, that means 60 cents on average is being used to buy something, which is 40 cents. There are very few marketplaces, if any, where it costs more to buy the thing than to get the thing itself. And so this is something that we think has to have a far more attention on it to begin to fix it. And then when you bring fraud and viewability into it, then you start saying, well, my dollar of purchase has bought me about 20 cents of effective media. Now, the good news out of this is it still works. It still gets you great results on average, and that's why people are putting more and more money into it. So it's not to say that it isn't a powerful set of technologies. What it's saying is it shouldn't cost you a dollar to get 20 cents of effective media. and that a lot of the benefits of this efficiency need to come back to you who are paying the bills. And if we take this up a notch, just to kind of put it in perspective, when you look at the global marketplace, right, there's about $20 billion going in. That means about $12 billion is funneling through this ecosystem in terms of cost. And this is a snapshot of the famous Lumascape. And we kind of would say, well, effectively, it's the advertisers who are funding the Lumascape through a lot of this mechanism, where tremendous amount of your advertising dollars are going to fund these technologies. And clearly, this chart and all the other Lumascape charts out there conclude that there are way too many entities chasing these dollars. And so it's our ambition here that through bringing more visibility, we'll put more pressure on this ecosystem to kind of consolidate and to become more efficient. So this is kind of the picture that we're all starting with. So let's just again put it now in the context for one of you, and I've used dollars here, so I hope that's okay. But when you get a bill for $1 CPM, we'll use CPM for our discussion. Again, using the numbers from the WFA, that's on average about 45 cents of media that's been bought at the exchange. Okay. And again, that working to non-working, if we use our traditional definitions of working to non-working, then it's a pretty crazy ratio here, right? And what our belief is, what we hear from a lot of people is, well, it's not that big a deal. How can I worry about it now? I got bigger fish to fry. I got bigger things to worry about. Well, that may be true right now. So if you are spending $100 million in media, and some of you spend far more and some of you spend far less, but using that as a round number, you're probably putting about 25% of that into digital. You're probably putting about 40% of that digital into programmatic, which means that today, out of your $100 million spend, yeah, you could say this is a small issue, right? You're spending 10 million in programmatic, 6 million of it might be funding to buy $4 million of media. You're probably getting good results, so you're probably kind of saying, whatever. I'll just keep focusing on bigger things. But in just a few years, the growth of digital and the growth of programmatic, even if you don't spend any more money into media, your small issue is going to become a very big issue, right? You're going to start seeing almost a quarter of your budget going to the middlemen, to your agents, to your vendors, versus actually buying the actual end product, which is the media. And so our belief here is that it's important now, while this is still a growing, still a relatively new area where there's still room to maybe rewrite the rules, that we need to push to shift money from the red to the blue. We need to move every percent that you can move from non-working to working, or from the supply chain to buying more media, is clearly in your interest. And that's really the whole ambition here. So what does that mean you need? You as an advertiser need to know, and I believe have the right to know, the actual cost of the media you're buying at the closing price, at the handshake between the buy and the sell. What was that price? The flow of the money. I think getting as detailed as you can on how your money flows and the working to non-working ratio you have today and how it is on each campaign and whether or not that's getting better or not. To have far more visibility into the competitiveness of the buy, right? It's a question that's asked a lot, especially in other media. But in this space right now, it's almost impossible for you to know if the price you got was a good price or a great price. You got the media, you know what you paid, you know your results, but you don't really have a sense of whether or not the price paid was a competitive price. We think there's a lot of value in beginning to build benchmarks to allow you to compare and contrast your activity to past activity, as well as your activity to others, as is done again in many industries and many other forms of media. So you have that sense of how am I doing and how do I get better? As well as with this very complex ecosystem, it's important for you guys to know the value and the impact each of the players is adding to the equation as much as possible. And so right now, again, you kind of see an end result after this whole supply chain has done its job, but you don't have a way to really assess the different components of the supply chain. And last, and not to be not least, I would say, today there is no place that we're aware of that is keeping a historical record of these transactions, and we think that's kind of almost I won't say a crime, but it's a shame that there isn't really going to be a historical record at the detail level. And it's something which we believe needs to exist, where these billions and billions of daily transactions can be kept in some way that you'll be able to go back for forecasting, planning, benchmarking, etc. So these are all things that I think on the surface sound very logical, and for the most part are probably not something you guys have. So how do we get there? And that's where we believe there needs to be entities like us and others who are really building solely around intelligence for the programmatic space. And so it all starts with going back to the way a dollar flows, and the fact that the DSPs and the SSPs, they basically create a log, or what we would say is your receipt for every single transaction that's made on your behalf. There are billions and billions of these a day. There are hundreds of billions of transactions a day. It's a tremendous marketplace already. Each one of these are though valued at a fraction of a penny. So the volume of the data and the fact that there are no standards for this data, nobody has stepped forward to kind of come up with a log file format that is a kind of a requirement. So the fact is, there's a lot of information being created, and some trading desks get this data at the impression level, but most of them do not. It's a tremendous amount of information, and not a lot of people have built something to actually manage it. And most of the DSPs that we're familiar with, and I can't say that's true for everyone in Europe and Asia, but as far as we know, after 90 days, or in some as few as 7 days, they throw away this data. Our belief is that it needs to come back to the advertisers, because it has a tremendous value that I'll show you of what you can learn from these logs, from the receipts for your transactions. And we believe that the advertisers, your community, needs to make sure they're accessible, auditable, analyzable, and that will allow for you to create intelligence for you guys. All the ways to see everything you've bought, and all the trends and all the insights you can get out of everything you've done, but also to begin to aggregate and normalize and anonymize that data so you can see how you compare to other peer sets, other industries, and have, again, that way to really sense if you're improving or not. And so this visual, which is, that's why I lay it out as simply as I can, is really the core of what you need to take away from this, is that these transaction logs are critical. And so a few snapshots of what you can learn when you start to see this data. So the first off is you can begin to start seeing your working to non-working ratio. This is just a snapshot from one of our tools, but the point here is to say, if in this example, somebody had a $1.5 million campaign, they can start to say, okay, now I add up all my trades by looking at all my transaction logs, and I see that only 49% of it actually bought media and 51% of it didn't. And then I can start to dissect and say, okay, well, where did that money go? And some of this are known pieces of information. You know what you pay your agency. You probably know your ad serving rates. Third-party data is something we can calculate actually through the data sets that are actually available as part of these logs. And some of the other numbers you may not know. Some of them maybe have to be industry guesses, or you might have to go and ask your trading desk, what do you pay the DSP? But you can begin to get a far better picture of how that money is being allocated, and then start to use that to benchmark against your campaigns and your past campaigns as well as others, and start to know, okay, am I doing as well as I can be doing? And then what the WFA started, and we want to continue, they did a great job of taking an industry average for that waterfall chart, for that money flow chart. But we can do this now on a campaign by campaign basis. And we can start saying, okay, let's look exactly for each campaign how the money flowed, and begin to look for that quote unquote unknown, which is the arbitrage, and start to see, okay, well, what percentage of the of my money is falling into this unknown / can't associate area, and start to ask questions about that to try to minimize that as much as possible. And in this example, the advertiser was getting a bill for $4.82, and they were buying media at the exchange for approximately $2.65. And then you can start looking at this over time and say, okay, how am I improving? Is my working media, am I consistent? Am I getting better at getting a little bit more bang for my buck and getting more, bringing down my non-working numbers? How do I look compared to others? Am I in line? Am I out of whack? And can I look at how this looks at campaigns that were performance campaigns, CPA campaigns versus branding campaigns, and start to see, okay, well, maybe I need to know that to run a certain kind of campaign costs more money than to run a different kind of campaign. But this is a kind of intelligence you can get when you start to dissect and ingest these transaction logs. And then the next step in our ambition, because we know it's a question everyone's going to ask, is, well, what about fraud and viewability? So just because 55% of my money was working because it got to the publisher, how much of that was actually non-fraud and was viewable? This is something we're working on now to work with some of those great companies in the fraud and viewability space to ingest their data, to now start giving you that next level of intelligence that says not only did a dollar in go to 40 cents for the publisher, but how much of that 40 cents actually bought functioning media, we'll call it. So this is coming soon. And then also what you can start to see when you push to get access to these logs are all the different players inside each campaign, and begin to, this is one view of how they are relatively performing. Are they delivering against my goal? Are they scaling? And it may not be interesting on one campaign, but if you look across 10 campaigns or 20 campaigns or 100 campaigns, you'll start to see the trends of, are certain DSPs always underperforming or overperforming? Are they better for certain kind of campaigns and other kind of campaigns? And this, again, is very objective way of looking at it, because it's coming directly from the actual transactions as opposed to trying to concoct some kind of test. You also start to get a view of when your money is being spent. Now, this is not when you were billed, but this is when it was spent. When was your working dollars? What day of the week? What time of the day? When did I pay over or under averages? What's the pacing? Are these trading desks spending my money in a logical way, or are they spending it all at the last 3 days of the campaign? So you can, again, because you're ingesting these things every day, maybe every hour, and you're looking at exactly what's happening. So those are just a few things you can learn from it. But what happens, and this is something that might be running through some of your heads, we get this question all the time, and it's kind of like, well, it's all really interesting, but if I'm getting what I asked for, if I'm getting my KPIs, why do I care about all this, right? Does it really matter how they bought the media and what they paid if at the end of the day I get what I asked for? And I think that, my pushback on that would be that, first, it's never good to be in the dark. It's never been proven in any industry that fog is a friend of a buyer. Usually, information asymmetry helps the seller, or at least the middleman. And most importantly, and this is a part that I think I just want you to think about a little bit, is what if you're setting the wrong goals? Just because you're getting your goals, what if you're setting the wrong goals? And here's kind of the example I would give. Because in a black box model that we have today, it's not that hard to make your KPIs look good. So if you built a business plan in any business unit you have, and fundamentally came up with the decision that you needed to spend $1 million to sell 100,000 somethings, and that means I have an allowable of $10 cost per acquisition, or cost per action, or cost per whatever you're trying to do, then logically your agency will then tell the trading desk, who will tell their DSPs to optimize to $10. And in a black box model, if they're buying media for $4, $5, $6, they're going to give you your $10, and they're going to make a very, very healthy margin, right? And you are no wiser. right? So now you spent all this time negotiating your agency fees down to whatever they are today, 5%, and they're also on the side making 100% on your money as well. But what if you knew the market? What if you could look and say, okay, I can see the kind of media we're going to be buying, the kind of media that we're going after. It's averaging, it's the histogram, the price spread on it. We can just say, you know what, it looks like it's in the neighborhood of 650. Okay. So then with that model, you could say, okay, look, I'm more than happy to let my partners make a good living. I'll even pay you 30%. Okay, that's double what it used to be with the 15% numbers. And in that model, you're paying now 650 instead of $10, and obviously saving, or you can put that money to buying more media. The whole point of this exercise is to say that it's important that goals not just be set by what the business needs, but as we create more intelligence into the programmatic space, that goals be set by what the market will allow. And if you know both, then you can set much smarter goals. So again, when you start to ingest these logs, you start to get lots of intelligence about things, and you can see this heat map, which starts to show you a lot of things about how pricing is the relative pricing for you. You get histograms, and you can kind of get a sense of the low and the high and the spread for any kind of media. You can start to see how money's flowing. So there's lots of things you can get that start to allow you to build smarter KPIs. And so with that, I'll just end on a few kind of summary points and recommendations. And so because obviously when we talk to people, they go, well, this makes sense. How do I fix it? And this quote, which I'm sure people have heard, but it's so true for this space, which is sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. We need to bring sunlight. We need to put light on the box, on the black box. And so that focuses on three things. We need the industry to push that transaction logs, these files that come off of DSPs and SSPs, become as universally available as your ad server logs. Right? Nobody is going to stop a brand from getting access to its ad server logs. Your agencies have them, and if you ask for them, I'm sure you'd get them if you wanted them. But the transaction logs seem to be something which not everybody either understands exist or are willing to actually provide. So that's really where we come in. We're trying to push for you to understand that these exist and they should be yours. That there should be independent third-party intelligence and benchmarks. And again, that's kind of how we're pushing. We believe that everybody inside this ecosystem has a bias, right? They either buy media, they sell media, they trade media. I think that our ambition as a company is to be that third-party agnostic entity that is ingesting the data and reporting it back as cleanly as conceivably possible. And that you need those tools. I think that data that Matt laid out in the beginning, saying what are your concerns, you have the right concern. A combination of digital media, transparency, trading desks, new business models, those are all at the top of your list. You need tools to manage a supply chain. The supply chain has evolved very fast into a different entity, and you as agencies don't have great tools to manage them, and that's what we're trying to bring to you. So last slide here, or kind of come to the end here. What can you do? First is you need to make sure you have rights and access to your logs. If it's not already clear, I'd make it crystal clear in your agreements. I would say, from my experience, very few historical contracts even touch this issue, because a lot of contracts were written before trading desks were even brought into the equation. So it's clear that you need to make this part of your agreement. You need to ask. I have a lot of brands who say, what do I do? I say, have you ever asked for the files? If you ask, you'll find out very quickly what they say. And to the point also made earlier in the data from the WFA, begin to explore those direct contractual relationships. It doesn't mean you can't use your agency to do a lot of the work for you, but if you have the DSP contract, you know exactly what you're paying them, and you have more rights to audit their data. I would continue as an ex-agency guy to say, find those trusted partners. There's no doubt they add a lot of value to the equation, but ask questions and don't assume that their answers are exactly what you want to hear. Make sure you verify and audit. I would ask the industry to begin to push and push and push for far better price discovery and market benchmarks. Without it, you guys are each individually fighting this fight separately and don't really have any way to compare and contrast. And so that is really, one of the big messages here is that getting access to your own data and allowing that data to be anonymized and aggregated to other data is really important for the health of this whole industry. And then I just reiterate rethinking your KPIs and start to say it's not just about the business need, but it's about what the market will allow. And last but not least, spread the word, right? Take control. It's your money. Agencies and desks like to convince you that they always have your best interest, but you need to really push and ask questions. And that ends with just so you understand how we're attacking this in the U.S. and it's something which we plan to do in Europe and hopefully Asia sometime very soon. We've partnered together with Ubiquity, which I know has a big presence in Europe. Partners at Ubiquity as well as with the ANA to do a study in the U.S. market, and then again we hope to do Canada and then Europe and Asia, where we're pulling together a good number of large or at least advertisers who are spending money in this space. We plan to ingest their data for hopefully 60 to 90 days and begin to set both individual company information and provide them back, but also to begin to build benchmarks for the whole industry. And this is just taking off in the US. Love to tell you more about it, and it's something that which we hope to do very soon in other markets. And with that, happy to take questions, and I'll wait on the rest of the. Go ahead.
Okay, so there are one or two questions trickling through, Andrew. Thank you very much for that. That's very, very interesting indeed. Thank you. So one question I have, it's about the study actually. So you talked about how many clients were involved in that? Did you say 60?
Well, no, we're aiming for about 30 advertisers, but there's no specific number, but somewhere in the name of 30 major advertisers.
Okay, and what exactly, can you elaborate a little bit more? What do you really hope to uncover here?
Yeah, that's a good segue. I'll put these slides up. They're a little small, but I'll at least paraphrase them. So the whole goal of this study is to say there needs to be a data-driven fact base to kind of build off of what you guys, the WFA, have started and done a great job of. We want to put real numbers to that whole waterfall chart. And so we are looking to bring together, as I said, somewhere between 15 and 30 advertisers in the US. And we have conversations going with the ACA to try to do something similar in Canada, and obviously working with you guys potentially do something in other markets to bring together a good representative sample of transactions to push their trading partners to provide these files, which could become obviously the short-term challenge is the willingness and ability of the DSPs to provide the data in a timely manner. We know some of them can, but we're not sure about all of them. And then to work to analyze this data to begin to set initial benchmarks on what say a working to non-working ratio is. I think the 60-40 numbers you guys have put together are a fantastic stake on the ground, but none of us actually know if that's what it is. So that's kind of a high level.
Sure. Okay. Well, that sounds like a great initiative, frankly, and I think we're very highly supportive of trying to get some more scrutiny of what these numbers might be. But as you identify yourself, you are incumbent upon getting these logs. Have you met much resistance from the agency side, from the vendors? Have you had anyone that's just said no, or how have you dealt with that so far?
So let me kind of there's two ways to answer that. As a company, we have been building this technology for about 2 years and have had many exchanges and conversations and beta tests and stuff with all different holding companies and agencies and trading desks. And through that process have obviously learned what kind of data exists, how easy it is to get, And in many cases, we've already mapped our data to the biggest trading desks, or at least our system, so we can pull data from MediaMath, the Trade Desk, from Google, from DoubleClick, from AppNexus. What they've all pretty much said, and I wouldn't say this is universally true because I don't think that this has been tested enough, is if the brand asks for their data, then we'll provide it. And so that's why we're saying, okay, well, brands, you need to begin to ask for your data. And so it's not to say that all of them will do it. Now, whether they'll do it quickly or they'll drag their feet, I don't know. And this study is in part to figure that out. Is how willing and able are these vendors and are these third parties to provide what is rightfully yours as the buyer? And it may not turn out that they do it as quickly as we want to this first time around, but we are fairly comfortable in our belief that if enough brands ask and enough brands begin to adjust their contracts, especially with all the pitches going on, at least in the US, it will start to tell and signal to the market that these are not things you're going to be able to hide, so you better make them available.
Yeah,
So it's a little bit of a learning curve as we go through this.
Okay. Right, so here's a question from the floor. So someone's asking here, do the AdFin tools work in all geographic and media? So in all geographies and in all media and in all digital channels, including TV, for example, potentially? So, how extensive is it basically? Where can you play?
So we've built the system, and part of the answer to that is all programmatically transacted media is where we'll play in terms of anything that goes through that generates a log that is at the same kind of level and detail, which fundamentally is all programmatic media. So all video, all display, all mobile. TV is absolutely something we want to do. It's small right now, so we haven't put much effort into it. But at the end of the day, we believe it should all come and be viewed and analyzed in the same way. So today we can do display, video, mobile. We have to map to DSPs as we learn who they are and what they are. So sometimes it takes there's a one-time effort to pull data from a new DSP. Back to the internationalization question and stuff. We've had that question several times. The current system is built for one currency at a time. So currently it's dollars, and we are close to being all ready to take, say, the euro. What we aren't prepared to do right now yet is to deal with campaigns in multiple currencies. They all have to be kind of normalized to a single currency. And it is in English, but there's very little language. There's very little text inside the tools. So our ambition is to be able to do any and all. And out of the gate right now, as I said, kind of one currency and focus on display, mobile, and video.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good to hear. So here's another question for you. So we've got someone asking a little bit about the data that you showed. Now, was that from a given, do you know whether that was from a given sort of agency trading desk setup, or was it a brand trading desk setup? Do you know how the client was working in that basis? Because the person who's asking this question is saying that I would expect huge difference in terms of non-working media, working media from one model to another. So, the data you have so far, can you say unequivocally to any extent whether agency trading desks, for example, deliver worse non-working or lower non-working shares to the other models that we might use?
No, I don't think we have enough data to say that unequivocal. I mean, other than anecdotally.
Yeah.
But I think the logic is there, and clearly, if you remove a player off the map, then there's a whole 10, 15, 20, 30% not being taken. And I think that becomes the question mark for companies that are considering building their own desks. I think that there is a substantial savings in terms of, well, let me step back. It depends how we all define working and non-working. And I think that is something which it might be interesting for the WFA and other organizations to think about trying to put a real definition together that people will buy into. Because in all honesty, you could argue that, the old definition of working time working isn't an apples to apples comparison to where we are now. Right. So when does a buy actually begin in a programmatic space? Is it when the money actually hits the publisher, which is how we are answering it today, or is it when you start to buy your audience, okay, and all that? And that's a question mark that I don't actually know the answer to. But I do think that once you remove a trading desk, which is fundamentally built to buy at one price and sell at another, then you have the opportunity to very much reduce your traditional view of working time working and put a lot more money to work. But then you have to hire those people, so you have other costs.
Okay. Okay. Good answer. All right, here's another one for you. So we've got a question here. The fraud and visibility piece that you mentioned, you said that was coming soon. When is soon, and how is that information going to be shared?
So we are looking for the right partners. So one of the challenges in that space is that there are at least 13 accredited companies with 13 different approaches to figuring out how to deal with fraud and viewability. So we're starting with one partner, I won't mention now under NDA, to first figure out how to connect the two data sets. The technical issues of they identify at the impression level which actual impressions were fraudulent. I'll use the fraud example. And how do we connect that through the right keys and identifiers to the exact price paid? We have that R&D is going on right now with one vendor in each space, one viewability company, one fraud company. Once we crack that code, which we're fairly confident we will, it's actually definitely a doable exercise, just figuring it out. Then the question is it something we need to try to replicate 13 times with 13 different companies or not? Because that may be a little bit ambitious. So our first task is figuring out how to connect it with one. I would say within the next few months, we will have that cracked with one viewability company and one fraud company. And then the question just will be whether companies decide to adopt that vendor because now they can do something others can't, or we try to extend it to all the vendors you guys are already using, which may not even be the same set here as here in the US. So save this year for us to crack that code next few months.
Okay, that's cool. All right, here's another one. So we've got someone asking here. If you're doing this stuff in-house and you're trading within the open market, are you not paying the market price already? Where is there a diminished need for this if you're going direct to market? If you're not going via the agency trading desk model, do you think that you don't need AdFin if you're doing this direct, so to speak?
I would say that you could make that case if you look at AdFin as solely an auditing tool. Then clearly, if you have fewer entities to audit or track, then that aspect of what we're offering is less needed. But what I think is our real ambition here is not to necessarily say use it to audit and track, which is what it can do, but is use it to ingest, aggregate, anonymize, so you can actually then compare you versus others. And that to me doesn't change if you're doing it yourself or you're doing it through somebody else. Because at the end of the day, the price paid by you still only see a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of the marketplace. And it would be, we believe that the end goal here should be, whether you're buying in-house or through others or whatever, the price paid is still the price paid. The price you were charged is a different issue. But the price paid is something which we think should be is intelligence you can still really value from. And the other thing is if you're using more than one DSP, which is almost inevitable if you're buying more than one kind of media. So obviously those who are good at mobile are different than those who are good at video, those who are different at display, etc. So when you want to, even if you're doing it yourself, if you want to be able to bring all that data together and have it automated and normalized in an automated fashion, and to be able to see one picture of everything you've done, that's what we bring to the table. That's kind of really the power of AdFin. It just happens to also be able to give you the ability to see the flow of the money as well.
Okay, cool. I get it. Right, so here's another one for you. Now, it might be too early for this kind of question because I know you're just getting started, really, but are you seeing much variation by geography in terms of level of arbitrage and in terms of working and non-working?
Yeah, I think you've answered the question. It's too early for us to know, but it's something we would like to know. I think our ambition is if we can run, study, or get beta clients in each market, that would be a very interesting thing to potentially partner with you guys at the WFA to tell the world that there are vast differences or they're not. And actually, we don't know the answer to that.
Okay, fair enough. Right, here's one or two more. Now, here's someone asking about setting up KPIs. Now, the question is, when we set up a new price KPI based on data, how do we know that the publisher will get their fair share and all middlemen will get less? How do we know that the non-working media is optimized? That makes sense?
Uh, I don't know if those are two different questions about the KPI. I mean, at the end of the day, you're setting. I'm not sure if setting the KPI, the goal shouldn't be. I guess I don't think the KPI setup is how do I make sure my publisher gets the most money. I do think
Agree.
that the way I guess I would view it is by by putting more pressure and more clarity onto the middleman as to your goals or more aggressive goals. And aggressive might be the wrong word. More market-based objectives, right? So if the market is going to allow you to buy at a certain price, then you are using that information to fundamentally set your KPIs. Then I think two things happen. One is your partners have to work harder to keep your business because you've now set a arguably a more aggressive goal. They're not going to be happy because they like easy goals. Um, and they're going to now have to figure out either how to work harder to make you happy or take far less margin, which happens a lot too. But rest assured, in the analysis we're showing you, there's a whole other side of the equation here where the publisher would like to know how much the SSP is taking and what arbitrage is happening over there too. Um, the logic would say that, and this is, I guess, to be proven, that if you guys, as advertisers, put more pressure on the buy side and you maintain your budgets, you don't cut your budgets, then clearly that money needs to flow downhill and buy more media, because it has to go somewhere. But I hear the question is, can we prove that, and it's not just someone else taking that? And I think that is a very logic, like it's a good next step. Like, okay, if that is what happens, how do we prove or how do we make sure that the publishers are getting their fair share? I think that's a good secondary uh, analysis to look into, and ideally bring publishers into that equation so that they can kind of give a true test of, are you seeing either A, better CPMs, or B, just more volume of dollars flowing to you with these changes? It's an interesting question.
It is, it is. Well, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. I think, frankly, I think this is a really interesting proposition you've got going on here. I've said that to you in the past. I think this could be really useful for advertisers, really quite powerful when in their pursuit to to scrutinize programmatic more. And the questions are still coming from the client side, aren't they? They're still saying, we want more transparency here, and hopefully this kind of approach can help us, because we've been looking around for a while to try and find some way to bring about that kind of scrutiny, and hopefully this is going to
Yeah,
help. So
and
thank you.
and what I would just like to add a few last things. So first off, anybody listening, any brands, I mean, not only will we provide the slides, so we'll make sure we get those to you. Um, Please let us know if this is interesting / compelling to do in your markets, because we need to prioritize, and we would be very interested to at least know that, so that we can, as quickly as possible, hopefully working with the WFA, to do something similar, whether it's just beta access using the tool, for free or at a discount to be able to kind of get a sense of how it worked for you, or to do a market test. And the second thing I'd say is, if you have counterparts in the U.S. or Canada where we're going to at least do this first, that you think would be interested, we're talking to them through the ANA and Ubiquity, but we're excited to hear from anybody who wants to know more and learn more. So I encourage you to do that. And last, please just feel free to email me. You can get my email from both the presentation and or the WFA. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, if you just skip through to the very last couple of slides, Andrew, just to say that that we have, and keep on going. Okay, but just pause here for a second. So, just to say, what's next from WFA? We do have a couple more meetings left before we sort of pause for the summer. We have a CMO forum going on today, actually. In a couple of weeks, we have a digital forum in Singapore, and for those of you who are based in Asia, you're welcome to attend this, and please do mention it to colleagues who haven't already received the invitation. We're looking at digital marketing capabilities, and we're looking at data-driven marketing in that session. That promises to be a pretty good one. Then we do pause for the summer, but then we come back. We come back sort of from September sort of time. We've got a number of meetings coming on. So please do get involved. And then the final slide is just to share Andrew's details and my own details. Now, yeah, please do get in touch. If you don't get these down, please do get in touch. I'm happy to share Andrew's details with you. And we will, of course, be sharing these slides out post the webinar. Plus, this is going to be turned into a recording and put on YouTube. So it'll be everywhere. We're going to disseminate it everywhere. So don't worry, you can find this elsewhere. So that just remains for me to say thank you once again to you, Andrew. That was a really interesting presentation. And thank you to everyone who's listened. I hope you found